Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Good evening. Welcome to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. I am Kat Hobson, your host. I am so excited about my show tonight, but before we get to it, y'all are going to be so excited. I am not kidding. But before we get to it, I have to give a shout out because, as a lot of you know, I have been fairly out of commission a little bit as far as, hip and back and whatever, and having difficulty with sitting for the length of a show. I'm doing it tonight. This is going to be a great thing. But I had signed up for the y'all know I do the St. Jude fundraisers, and I had signed up for February's, which was walk 100 miles in February. Well, I'm not allowed to walk a mile. And I was upset because I've never failed to meet one of their challenges. And although the first of the year with the squats almost killed me, but that's okay. It didn't. So I have to tell you that I have a great friend who stepped up. He lives in LA. He's the founder of the Hollywood Ghost Hunters. Y'all mostly know him, Rick McCollum. He lives in LA with the weather they've been having. And he had about 20 30 miles to go. And I have to tell y'all that with them under flood warnings, because the area he was in was flood warned, and he shared that with me, he got in over 7 miles yesterday. And if this is not somebody who is A, a true friend to me, but B, a true diehard supporter of St. Jude's Hospital, then there's not a cow in Texas. I'm just saying. And not only is he doing this to help me help them, he is also a person who donates all of the profits from his books, his merch sales, everything goes straight to St. Jude. So I want to tell y'all thank you so much for supporting me in all of the other fundraisers I've done and will continue to do. And yes, you will hear from me about those. But B, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Rick McCollum for making this happen. And also for being my muscle on getting donations. If he has insulted any of you about your Starbucks use, my apologies. But thank you, Rick. So, yeah, I have to tell you about tonight's guests because there's just, you come across people in your work who, when you hear about them, you're like, really? Well, that's so interesting. But my guests tonight are Bill and Jaci Kousoulas. They are authors. They wrote the book Bridging the Tragedy, which is Silver Linings in the Mysterious Ohio River Valley. I think this topic is extremely, timely. But they also are the founders of Phenomenology Research Professionals. They are people who just have, have an intense passion for investigating the unknown, as well as understanding how people in their communities can grow from terrible tragedies. We're seeing this play out as a nation right now. And there's always, no matter how bad something is, down the road when you look back, there's positivity that comes from everything. And these are people who have found a way to help show that. And I don't think we can have that pointed out often enough. So that's why I asked them if they would join me, because I think they're brilliant. And the reason I say this show is so timely is because they were supposed to be on with me in January. And they had a medical emergency that prevented that. And now, Bill is healing right along with me. We're, healing partners now. But this is the time that the universe decided they needed to be on fate. So I never question the universe when it comes to things like this. So Bill and Jaci, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited that you are here.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for having us on, Kat.
Thanks for being patient with us through our little problems with Bill.
Well, I'm going to tell you that, I have had my share of issues physically, and they're unexpected, but they are controlling. You can't do anything about it except what your body wants to do, especially when it is back or, any part of the support system that gets in trouble. You have to allow it to heal at its own rate. And it does control the show. So I'm just glad that it's having a positive outcome. And
well, so far so good. So far so good. Things are a lot better than they were beginning of January, no question.
Well, no doubt. right? I'm just glad you're here. So there is so much to what y'all do. You know, Bill, you actually, you've completed your doctorate, so I guess I could call you Dr. Bill as opposed to Mr. Bill. And it is amazing to me because I love positivity. I actually, you know, created a Facebook page called Positivity to Change the World because I think that's what will do that. I have great faith in it. And, you know, you hear there's so much negativity that's just flowing everywhere from all different sources about all different topics. And it can be overwhelming when people give voice to that or energy to that. And stopping it is really just a matter of saying, oh no, look at that rose. That thing just bloomed right out. Or, you know, look at that puppy not eating my shoe. It's a good day. So, you know, it's, I'm with you. I'm all about the positive psychology that you focused on. What was your motivation to go in that direction?
So again, thanks for having us on, Kat. I really appreciate the question. As I navigate these two crazy lab puppies that are wrestling right beneath me, girls, settle down. Really, I think being somebody who's been really influenced by the whole Mothman situation that happened in the 1960s in West Virginia, the culminating event of the Mothman episode was the Silver Bridge disaster. And with the Silver Bridge disaster, obviously 46 lives were lost, which is a terribly traumatic thing to happen in any community, but certainly a small rural town like Point Pleasant, West Virginia, really 5,000 people at the most. And when this happened, what was told to us was everybody, I'm sorry. Can you jump in for me here? Jackie, can you jump in for me?
She's asking why you went in the direction of psychology for your doctorate is what I thought the question was.
Well, bringing the positive focus through it because not everyone does.
And I totally understand that. I was just asking if maybe she could jump in to help because I'm navigating two dogs that are not cooperating with me.
Absolutely.
Though, okay, so I was thinking he was going to answer. So could you repeat the question, please? I am so sorry. Because I thought I heard it, and I heard it wrong.
That's not any issue. I had just said that I was so impressed that he had chosen, you know, the positive psychology, and you know that it was so amazing that was where he went because not everybody is into the positive side of psychology. It's so, you know, you hear about the dark and the troubled, but that's not where he chose to go.
Okay, so what happened with him in his life before he even met me? He was previously married, and he went through a very long, painful divorce. It was a marriage of I think around 2 years or something, but the divorce was like 6.5 years long or something. There were no children involved, no property involved. There really was nothing, you know, to fight over. But his ex-wife just kept fighting, trying to get everything she possibly could from him. So when it came time for him to do his dissertation, he requested to do it. It was kind of a vague topic. I don't even remember what his topic was, but they told him he had to narrow it down. So what he ended up doing his research question on was basically on men in their 30s and 40s that went through a divorce. And he wanted to look at the positive aspect of that because through his process, he learned how much he had grown from that. And he knew that other men had to grow too. And as he was doing this, I was hoping that he was going to write a book because there are so many red flags that men don't see and women you choose to ignore. So I was hoping that he'd possibly write a book just to help people see these red flags and stop before it's too late, before it gets to the process of maybe even marriage or a divorce, maybe counseling or something like that. But but we decided we were going to do the Point Pleasant book. We went to Point Pleasant in 2016 for the first time, and we met a lady named Carolyn Harris, and Carolyn touched our hearts so deeply that we wanted to do something to honor her. So that's where the book, or that's where that whole idea came from, was just try to do something for Carolyn. But she passed away before Bill was able to even write a book about her. He wanted to do her write a book about her, and she passed away, so that wasn't anything that could happen. And he was like a little devastated that he wasn't able to tell her story, but so we thought it through and came up with the idea of doing what we did it on. But as far as his positive approach to it, it's because he leads a positive life, and a lot of that came from his bad experiences.
Well, that's the best way I know to overcome them.
Yeah.
Is just to, any kind of darkness, the best way to fix it is to literally shine a light on it, whatever light you have. And I think it's when things stay hidden or protected, or, you just don't give them, you give them power when you don't put light on them. And most of the people I know who have been in his situation could not take the power that they should because of circumstances. And he did. So kudos. That's awesome.
And life is really good today, Kat. Sorry for the distraction there. I put the girls into their kennels. I can hear them barking in the background. It always kind of tugs at my heartstrings. We love those dogs so much, but they're supposed to be asleep right now. And it's really odd that they're up and doing what they've been doing. But Jackie, I'm sure, did a great job of jumping in and kind of filling in the blanks a little bit about the reason why I chose to focus on post-traumatic growth. Mm-hmm. And that we decided to do, the post-traumatic growth book in conjunction with the Silver Bridge disaster and the whole Mothman phenomenon, because with those lives that were lost, and Jackie mentioned Carolyn Harris, Carolyn actually lost her 2-year-old son in the bridge disaster. So her first husband and son both were killed as a result of the bridge going down. And what we saw the few days that we got to know Carolyn was she just really exemplified so much grace, and she was such a kind soul that we fell in love with her. She felt like she was a long lost relative. And mm-hmm. every day we were in Point Pleasant, that week that we were there in 2016, we hung out with her at her restaurant. And when we lost her a few months later, shortly after I had, shared with Jackie that I wanted to contact her, it was very challenging for us at that point to regroup and decide that we, wanted to go back to Point Pleasant again. We didn't know when we went there in 2016 that we'd be going every year since then. And our lives have just kind of developed around it. It's kind of a second home to us now. So we coupled some of my research that I did for the dissertation with the post-traumatic growth that a person can gain as a result of going through the divorce process. And we just extrapolated some of that and then added to it in terms of the bridge disaster, the bridge going down, and some of the paranormal phenomena that took place. How did that affect the people in community and the community at large?
Well, that is that's very heartrending about Carolyn. That's one of those things that I'm sure that you covered, would be how someone survives that loss. One of my very first interviews with Fate Radio was with Andrew, the director of the Mothman Museum. And I was not well versed in that experience. I had just a rough knowledge. And as I started researching the phenomenon, the information that he had, the information that was in the Fate article, and then I thought, well, there is so much more to this. And when I started going through it, I thought, this is horrid. This was horrid. And yet the survivors that I've spoken with they weren't bitter as a rule. there were some people that were angry, but there's not very many left. I don't guess, but it's just been something that when I saw this in your info, I was overwhelmed because it was such a thing to try to find the positive side of, and here you are doing that.
And I don't know that it even was really that difficult. We really interviewed the right people for the project. We had kind of set our sights originally on talking to a few people. One of them we knew we wanted was our very first interviewee, and that's a guy by the name of Mark Griffith. And we met Mark with Carolyn at her restaurant the very first day, and he was there almost every day that we went back there in 2016. And he had shared some things from not his childhood, but from his earlier life, some tragedies that he had been through in his family. And we got to know him better and better. And he took us out to the TNT area for the first time, showed us around there, and he just became a good friend. In fact, I just talked to him yesterday. He calls pretty frequently. I usually talk to him at least once every couple of weeks or so, but we knew we wanted him to be our first interview. And then we also wanted Jeff Wamsley from the museum. We'd become friends with him over the last several years, but we didn't ask him. He actually volunteered for it, which was really awesome. We kept asking him if he knew people that wanted to be in it. And he said, well, I'll be in it. And we thought that was fantastic.
There you go. Yes.
Yeah. And then Andy Colvin, who's written all kinds of things about the whole Mothman story and done tons and tons of research. We contacted him, and we've become good friends with him the last couple of years too. And it's just been a wonderful experience for us. It was really pretty easy to tease out the good things that came as a result of the bridge disaster. And it really was based upon the way that the interview questions were put together, because it got people thinking about things that maybe they hadn't thought of in that particular context before. What good came from this? What can you tell us about the community? It just flowed really naturally. It wasn't forced at all.
Well, we're going to have to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Y'all come back too.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Paratalk Radio is your one-stop for all things paranormal, the unknown, and the supernatural. Join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for discussions and guests on topics such as ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs, and more. This broadcast is rated M for mature and intended for listeners over 16 on paratalkradio.com.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I'm so glad that you're here with my guests. I have Bill and Jaci Kousoulas. They are the founders of Phenomenology Research Professionals. They have written a fantastic book, which is Bridging the Tragedy, Silver Linings in the Mysterious Ohio River Valley. And, we were talking about the different people that you had spoken with. What got you into actually deciding to go and do this work. You said that, and I find it interesting that the people you spoke with almost as a whole were able to come back with positive outcomes of this tragedy. And, your book has a 5-star rating, and you have got a lot of interest generating about this. People, by the way, you can find this on Amazon, and it's worth the buy. But what specifically did you ask them for positive things that came to their lives out of that, or was it positive lessons that were taught, or good things for the town? What were you looking for primarily?
Well, I'm thinking back to the way we put the guiding questions together for the interviews. They were all based around, tell us what your life was like before the Silver Bridge collapse happened, And we interviewed people who ranged anywhere in age from the youngest individual was Jeff Wamsley, the owner of the Mothman Museum. Mm-hmm. He was 60 years old when we interviewed him. And we interviewed the oldest gentleman for the study, and his name was Jimmy Wedge. And Jimmy was 79 years old when we interviewed him. So we basically asked them, what was your life like before the Silver Bridge disaster happened? What were you doing when the Silver Bridge collapsed? And what was your life like afterwards? And we had a series of sub-questions that were just really kind of designed to be more conversational in nature, kind of like we're talking tonight. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have any preconceived notions about how they were going to answer us at all. But they gave us so much really good information just as a result of answering those guiding questions and opening up a really comfortable conversation with them.
What do you think was as a rule, did every person that you invited to participate agree to?
Well, I think we only asked, let me think. There was Jeff, Andy, Harriet, Mark, and Rick Handley. Mm-hmm. And then I think we approached Denny Bellamy too. So that would be 6. The other 5 people, so everybody we asked to do the interviews did. Mm-hmm. The other 5 people came forward as a result of the advertisement that we placed through the editor-in-chief at the time of the local newspapers in the Point Pleasant area. So we had 5 people come forward as a result of seeing the ad that was placed on the front page of those newspapers the week before we headed out there, which was really cool. So they actually called us and said, hey, my name is Jimmy Wedge, and I lost both of my parents in the Silver Bridge disaster. I'd like to be part of your study, which was really pretty amazing that he was that he really wanted to come forward and participate. I felt a huge sense of responsibility because he lost both his mom and dad. Yes. Linda Lane also came forward as a result of the ad in the newspaper too. And so did Charlene Westwood. Now, Linda asked her friend Marva Bailey to participate after she had participated in the study. And I think I'm missing one more. Do you know who I'm missing?
Marva, and you also didn't mention Harriet. But Harriet, we asked Harriet.
Okay. But there were 6 people that we had invited, and then 5 other ones came forward as a result of the ad in the newspapers.
That's pretty astounding for such a small community. About something so personal, too.
Yeah, we felt really, really honored to work with the people we did. It was very humbling, and really it was, believe it or not, it was fun. I mean, most of these people were just a lot of fun to talk to. They really were.
Well, it was the luxury, too, of time, because there had been so much time that had gone by that probably they were pretty well accepting of the past. And because this was 1967, right, that the bridge collapsed?
Yes.
And in December, no less. But, well, when you spoke with them, they're bringing the positive experiences that they feel arose from this, but you were also interested in the paranormal phenomenon. Did they include that as part of their interviews?
Who did not choose to answer those questions? Do you remember? Mark was one who did not answer those questions, but I think everybody else did, didn't they?
Yeah, what we did is we asked a series of questions regarding the bridge collapse and how it affected them in their personal lives, and then what they saw happen in the community, how it affected the community from their perspective. And then we said, we'll go on to the second part of the interview. If you want to speak about Mothman, UFOs, Men in Black, whatever may have whatever you might have seen at that time. And I think only Mark was the one that he did talk a little bit about Mothman. He mentioned about his dad. So I think everybody talked a little bit about it. I think Rick Hanley, he talked about it, but he didn't have a lot to say about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what we did, Kat, is we came up with 2 sets of guiding questions, like Jackie just mentioned. One was for the bridge disaster specifically, and then the other was for the paranormal phenomena that took place in 66, 67. And we were really careful to kind of differentiate those things from one another, because over the years, what's happened is that a lot of people who are interested in Mothman combine the Mothman with the bridge disaster, and they make statements or assertions that Mothman had something to do with the bridge going down, et cetera, et cetera. Now, when we talked to Beth Sargent, who was the editor-in-chief of the newspapers, she said, I don't have a problem posting an ad for you guys, but you got to remember, even though this happened over 50 years ago, there are people who this is really deeply touched, and you need to be very careful about the way you approach things. She said, you can talk to him about Mothman, you can talk to him about the bridge disaster, but don't combine those two together. So that's why we separated those questions, to make sure that we weren't going to be causing anybody any kind of harm psychologically by trying to combine those 2 things together. And we never really had thought that the Mothman and the bridge disaster were things that were mutually interdependent. We thought they were 2 different things that happened during the same time.
Just an odd stroke of fate.
Really an exclamation point that probably catapulted the whole Mothman legend into what it is today, because I've talked about this with a lot of different folks. I don't think that if the bridge disaster had not happened, that the Mothman legend would be nearly as prominent as it is today, because it was such a horrible event. It was so difficult for that little community, but it really kind of put an exclamation point on those 13 months of paranormal phenomena that took place.
Well, it is. And I know that Gray Barker is someone whose work I've enjoyed for a long time. He's one of my research sources. And John Keel as well, but Gray especially. I know that his approach was that the both experiences, the anomalies prior to the collapse, as well as the actual horrific collapse, for such a small community, that was such it would be tough anywhere. But when you have just a small, as close-knit as Appalachian towns are, I mean, everybody is family almost. And if they're not, then they might as well be. Then, I just can't even imagine what it must have been like for everyone in the town. But when I was reading Gray's work on this, it's always been interesting to me that, because he first educated me on Men in Black, right? So, and I know a man in black personally. So, it's really odd that even that was part of the anomalies that were reported prior to this. No one was approached after the incident, right? By people like that.
Actually, there were instances that were in the Mothman Prophecies book by John Keel. He does talk about how Mary Hyre had been approached, Mary Hyre being the Athens, Ohio Messenger correspondent who was working with John Keel doing investigations back in 66 and 67. She was approached by a couple of really odd fellows in her office after the bridge went down. And they were talking to her about UFOs and such in a way that she was kind of scratching her head because the bridge had just collapsed. That was all the news. That was front central. People weren't talking about UFOs. People weren't talking about Men in Black. But yet these guys were still showing up in her office a couple of weeks after the bridge went down.
Were these Men in Black, were they like the people that looked like they didn't have real skin? Or were these people that were obvious military that were just showing up for questions? I mean, because there's two different types, right?
There are.
Yes, there are.
Go ahead. Go ahead and tell her about what Carolyn told us.
Well, Carolyn told us there was two different types. She said when we asked her if she had seen them, and she said she saw both, and she called one type the government men. She called them government men, being from West Virginia. And then she said the other ones had like a waxy type of complexion, and they weren't from around here, is what she said, making it sound like they weren't from around the United States or maybe even our planet. And then she talked a little bit more about that they were just unusual.
But to answer your question, Kat, the ones that Mary Hyre saw were the latter. They had really thick Coke bottle bottom glasses and they had like a hypnotic effect when they would talk to her. The one who was in her office after the bridge collapse happened was actually several feet away from her, and he was super short. He wasn't even 5 feet tall. And he began asking her questions about John Keel. He said that he was a friend of Gray Barker, and he just picked up a book by John Keel, and he read it, and he thinks that Keel is a liar, and he wanted to go with Mary. Yeah, he wanted Mary to take him to some of the places where they had seen flying saucers. And she said, I'm not going to go anywhere but home and go to bed. But before she knew it, this guy was like really totally up in her personal space. But she never saw him make that walk from being, 8 to 10 feet away to right in front of her desk. And as he was looking at her with these Coke bottle bottom glasses, it's like he was hypnotizing her. So he was definitely not the government man. He was more of the otherworldly sort.
Well, it's interesting that he read Barker's books but thought Keel was lying.
Yeah. Good point.
It's 6 of one and a half dozen of the other, right?
Yeah, usually it's the other way around because Barker was a wonderful writer, a great literary craftsman. I mean, he was, but he kind of played fast and loose with the rules. And even his book, The Silver Bridge, which is a really entertaining book, is more of like a docudrama. It's not really the reporter's work that the Mothman Prophecies is, where Keel was, Johnny on the spot and taking notes and working with witnesses. Barker really kind of went off the deep end in a bunch of different ways, but it really rounds out the whole experience of what it must have been like there in Point Pleasant back in the 60s by reading both of those sources. I think they're both very important.
I think so too. And, it's really funny because I found Barker by mistake. I was looking for a book on Men in Black and thought I had bought, I I thought I had bought Nick Redfern's, and apparently I clicked the wrong link on Amazon, and I'm into this book, and I'm like, because it was a Kindle, and I'm like, this is not Nick's verbiage. You know, what on... It was Gray Barker. I was like, oh, so I'm talking to Nick about it at an event, and he was just like, that's Barker. I was like, yeah, you're right.
So, Kat,
Okay.
the book you have then would be Men in Black: The Secret Terror Among Us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the guys that are on the cover of that are Tim and John Frick, dressed up as Men in Black. They're friends of ours. We know them from the whole Mothman scenario. They get dressed up as Men in Black during the Mothman museum or Mothman festival, and then they hang out there for that. And the guy who wrote that or published that book is Andy Colvin, who's in our book as well.
Whoa, what a great coincidence, right? Don't you love when things come tied up in nice packages?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that speaks volumes for your book. So,
well, thank you.
I think everybody should go and get it personally, but that's just me. Actually saying, buy the book, you're going to be glad you did. So, when you had the opportunity to talk to people like Mary, was she the only person that was approached by these, by these anomalous men who were wanting to get residents off to themselves? Because that's what it sounds like they were doing.
Yeah, Mary's actually been gone for a number of years, so we didn't get a chance to talk to her. But her niece was a lady by the name of Connie Carpenter, and she's written about in the Mothman prophecies also. And Connie was approached by Men in Black after she saw a Mothman on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning yet, coming home from church. And it was really scary for her. One of them tried to grab her out of the window of their late model car. And these Men in Black were notorious for driving around in vehicles that looked like they just came off the showroom floor, but they were 10 or 15 years old. And this was one of those cases. And this young man in black grabbed onto Connie's arm, and she was able to break away. And she ran back to her home and locked herself in her apartment. And a couple of days later, she found a note that was scribbled in crayon that was slid underneath the door. And it said, "Be careful, girl, I can get you yet." So they were doing what they could to really intimidate anybody who saw Mothman. Unfortunately, these are people that we didn't get a chance to talk to. So this is all just legendary kind of stuff that I'm sharing with you right now, stuff that's directly from the Mothman Prophecies book.
Darn, we have to take another break. This one's quicker. We'll be right back. Y'all come back too, and I hope y'all are enjoying this nearly as much as I am. See you on the flip side.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back. I am so glad that y'all are here to be able to enjoy all this information. Bill and Jackie have worked very hard to put this book together, and I'm loving it. I hope you are too. So, I had not realized that the Red Cross got into Point Pleasant as quickly as they did. And, the blurb says 150 Red Cross volunteers were working that night to get to rescue people and to get the debris out so that they could get to people. And, it's overwhelming how fast that this was attended, or, that people were able to get there. That's a lot of people.
And that's a piece that Jackie had contributed to the book. I'm not even sure where that part came from. Do you remember?
I don't remember, no.
Probably from the Silver Bridge disaster book that Ruth and Martha Fout wrote that we bought the first trip that we made to Point Pleasant. I'll bet that's where that came from. Because I remember that was your contribution, one of your contributions to the early part of the book. But yeah, they mobilized in a hurry.
That's huge because really and truly, communications were not great in 1967.
Yeah.
You saw party lines, which actually probably helped in that instance. But, you couldn't just hit the Wi-Fi and, post it on Facebook and say, we need people now, right?
Yeah, it hit the news really fast. Because many people said that they remember watching TV and their programs being interrupted because of the Silver Bridge collapse. A bridge collapsed, and nobody thought it was the Silver Bridge. But I think it's because it was probably on the Ohio side and West Virginia side of the river that they were able to pull so many people together so quickly. If it would have just been, like one area, like say, like in our town, we have the Kishwaukee River, and if something were to collapse there, it would just be Sycamore departments, and then whatever departments they can get coming from, towns from other places. So I think that might be part of it, but also they had the military reserves that were available to help. And Susan Sayre talks about that. Her dad was one of them, that he was constantly, every time there was an emergency of any type, he was always called out. So she remembers that, from her childhood. And she remembers her dad being called out for the bridge collapse. So I think there were people like that as well that were available quickly.
That is fantastic, to be honest. If you're going to, that's another thing I think about the Appalachian region, is that they do have such a sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like small town America, where that seems to be the case more so than maybe in urban areas. Because while you have more personnel in an urban area, it's not always such a sense of community between neighborhoods and little outlying towns and stuff like that. But when you're rural,
it made a heck of a noise too, because Jeff Wamsley talked about it. He thought it was thundering in the winter, and he thought it was very strange that he had heard thunder, and he was in the basement of his home. And then I think Jimmy Wedge is the one that said it sounded like somebody cracked a whip really loud. So if you have that really loud sound, probably anybody that did there were emergency personnel, they probably went out to see what was going on.
Right. That's just, I'm sorry, I think that's astounding.
Yeah.
Because you don't think about, or I don't think about the logistics of the sound and how horrifying. Yeah, if you're picking up on the area it's coming from, that's not a sound you would anticipate coming from a bridge. It would have to be something bad. But
well, the sound of the bridge, cracking and whipping and turning, and then the metal falling into the river, the smashing and the splashing, and then the horrible screaming. I mean, there was a lot of horrible sounds coming from that bridge collapse. So,
yeah.
I mean, it makes me choked up and teary-eyed to even think about, talking. I mean, remembering, some of the interviews. It got emotional for a lot of people, and it got emotional for me several times, because when they would talk about this, and you know that these were people of the community, there were mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers, and it was heartbreaking to hear their stories, when they talked about that type of stuff, that type of things. Talking about the funerals being held at Christmas time, and, the whole community devastated by all of that.
I think that's what makes it more special that y'all did this, though.
Yeah.
Because
we
there
felt
was a lot of pain.
Good. We felt from the very first phone call that we got when Jimmy Wedge called me to volunteer for the study, we felt a very huge sense of responsibility to absolutely make sure that we honored what happened with him, and not really stopping to put two and two together at that point in time. It didn't really occur to us that Jimmy was 25 years old when he lost both of his mom and dad in a bridge disaster. And he, during the interview, shared with us that even though it was devastating, even though he was the youngest of the kids, he said, thank goodness I was 25 years old when it happened. Because if I had been 15 years old when it happened, losing both my mom and my dad then, he said that would have been absolutely devastating to a young person that was, still in high school and still trying to, go through adolescence and get a driver's license and, go with your first girlfriend or whatever the case might be. He said, thank goodness I was already establishing my family. I was married. I already had a child of my own. And Jimmy was the boys basketball coach for the varsity team at Point Pleasant. And this was his debut when the bridge went down. And he carried on with the game, even knowing the bridge was down. And he expected his mom to be at the game. And his mom had just learned how to drive, even though she was not a young person. He was 25. She was in her early 50s. And he was expecting her. He kept looking off into the crowd to see his mom, and mom wasn't showing up. Mom wasn't showing up. What Jimmy didn't know was dad, who was a vice president with a company that was headquartered in Kansas City. Dad had flown in to surprise Jimmy at his debut, picked up mom, and on the way across the bridge collapsed and they were both killed. So to be able to have a conversation with a gentleman who, we walked into the interview really feeling kind of intimidated. He was the biggest cut up of anybody that we interviewed. Really, he was hilarious. The things that he spoke about during that interview, yeah, he was devastated. Yeah, he had significant trauma, and he carries some of that with him today yet. I mean, who wouldn't? But he's been very successful. He's got 3 kids. He's a very happy guy. He said, I'm not a millionaire, but I'm pretty close. And I think the thing that really, really surprised us the most about Jimmy is that Jimmy didn't give interviews. He didn't give interviews. I guess I'm kind of coming back round about what you were just talking about, Kat. And that is, we felt really fortunate to be able to interview him. Even Denny Bellamy, who's been in 60 some odd documentaries, said, you got the man. And we just were in the right place at the right time. And he was ready to talk about it. So, I mean, we felt like it was just what an honor to have a conversation with a guy like him and just get to know him a little bit. It was really just fascinating.
It was really odd too when Jimmy called, because we had planned lunch with Jeff Wamsley and we were telling Jeff about it, and he's like, no, it couldn't be him because he doesn't give interviews. And so he's naming all the wedges. And he's like, you sure it wasn't one of them? I mean, he's literally telling us it could not be Jimmy Joe Wedge. So it was like, no, that's who he said he was. I mean, that's who we think is coming.
Yeah, 3 people, Jeff and Rick Hanley and Denny Bellamy, all said that. They're like, you got the guy. This is the one guy you want for this interview. He's the one you want. And like I mentioned, he lost both mom and dad. That was a horrible thing, but what a wonderful interview he was. What a fun guy he was. What a great guy he was to talk to.
Yeah, he said he felt it was time to talk about it. And he said he's talked to his family about it, and he felt like he needed to talk to his family one more time and remind them of their family history because it's important.
That was important.
So, yeah.
What a compliment to y'all.
Yeah, to trust us with his information. Definitely. Well, but that's kind of how we felt with all of them, because they all were affected one way or another. They all had some type of emotion behind it. I remember when we were interviewing Mark, and he had moved to Point Pleasant from Nitro when he was 8 years old. And he said he was just like out wandering the streets of Point Pleasant, just like, because he was new in town, checking out to see what there was, around. And he said that some lady came out of the house and told him, you better get home because there's this big bird man flying around and don't let it get you. And he looked and he said, what do you got to go tell a kid something like that for? You want to scare him half to death? And he had a look on his face like he was still traumatized by that happening.
Wow.
Yeah.
Still
life-changing moments.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I wouldn't cope well with somebody telling me that now at 60. I'd be in the house, but and never to leave again. But that's really intense. That really is. I'm so glad that you were able to connect with so many people. The trust that was putting y'all to do this right. And at the time that they were chatting with you, you were still kind of unfounded. They didn't know if you were going to be doing it right. They were trusting you to have respect for their legacies. And there you were doing just that.
One of the super nice things is, since the book was published, two of the ladies that were in the book that were really hesitant, and literally one of them cut stuff out of her interview that she didn't want us to publish. They both told us that they were honored to be part of it. And that just really made it all worth it.
No doubt.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It is.
So how much of her interview did she cut?
Oh boy, it was a lot. I bet, when it's funny too, because really we as part of the psychological process and trying to work through the methodology that we did, it's really important to first, get the interviews. We used video cameras and audio on iPhones and that kind of a thing, and we recorded them and then transcribed them all. And after transcribing them, we sent them back to all the participants to make sure that what was in there was what they wanted in there. And the lady that Jackie's talking about that cut part of her interview out, I bet she knocked out a good third of it at least. Yeah. And there was some really rich stuff that was in there, but to her credit, she didn't feel confident making statements on behalf of other people. And she wanted to make sure that some of the statements that she said wouldn't be taken out of context. And she didn't want to offend anybody. So we cut everything down that she wanted us to, yet she still left us with some wonderful data, some great information. And one of the main things was that, we talk about the Silver Bridge disaster. And for anybody who's familiar with the town of Point Pleasant and the legend of Mothman, when the bridge collapsed, they were left without having a bridge, which was the conduit, not just from Point Pleasant, West Virginia to Gallipolis, Ohio, but really it was both the conduit for the east to the west and the north to the south, really for the United States. I mean, this was a huge, huge area for the highway to go through. And so Point Pleasant was a booming little town. It wasn't big, but they had a lot of business as a result of the bridge, taking that major highway system right through the town. When the bridge went down, and it took them 2 years to put a new one up, when they finally erected the new bridge, now it's to the outside of Point Pleasant. It goes totally around it. So any commuters who are over the road, like truckers or travelers or what have you, they don't have to stop in Point Pleasant for anything. So the town went down the tubes very rapidly. businesses closed. Nobody was stopping for gas. Nobody was stopping for food. And it was just a horrible thing to the economy. But Marva, to her credit, said, you know what? I don't think if that bridge would have been put in the same place as it was before, the town would have been able to support it, because traffic just got busier, trucks just got bigger. There's no way the town would have been able to support that. I thought that was a wonderful observation.
It was. Well, we're at the top of the hour, which means that we have to take a break. But when we come back, we're going to get into, we're going to get into how you developed your study. And I think that talking about phenomenology research professionals is a good thing. So we'll hit that. And we'll be back right after this. Y'all come back to you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. A year after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, fighting continues to rage in the eastern Ukrainian region of Donbas. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports the Russians have been making gains there at a glacial pace, but at the expense of thousands of lives.
The town of Bakhmut has been the epicenter of the fighting for several months. Both Ukrainian and Russian forces have dug trenches in the muddy earth, reminiscent of World War I. Fighting for the Russians is a private mercenary force called the Wagner Group. Its founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, claimed this weekend that his forces have taken over a tiny hamlet near Bakhmut. But Ukrainian military reports say the villages there are still under Ukrainian control. Ukraine is asking Western allies to speed up the delivery of weapons amid reports that China could start sending weapons to Russia. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken travels to Central and South Asia this week. At one point, he'll be in the same room as his Russian and Chinese counterparts, as NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports.
Secretary Blinken plans to stop in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan before going to a Group of 20 gathering in India. Assistant Secretary of State Donald Lu says Blinken will be talking to these countries about Russia's war in Ukraine.
We may not share the same approach every day on Ukraine, but I think we do share the goal that this conflict end, and it ends based on principles in the UN Charter.
The Russian and Chinese foreign ministers will be at the G20, but U.S. officials won't say whether Blinken will meet either of them on the sidelines of a meeting focused on food and energy security. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
The crash of a train carrying toxic material in the town of East Palestine, Ohio, has become one of the first hot-button issues in the 2024 presidential election. NPR's Tamara Keith says this incident has grown political because Republican politicians have seen an opportunity to criticize Biden.
This really hit a fever pitch when on Monday, President Biden made a surprise trip to Kyiv, Ukraine. And hard-right Republicans like Congressman Matt Gaetz said that he was ditching America for Ukraine. Donald Trump Jr. and others tweeted criticism that Biden was going to Ukraine before East Palestine.
NPR's Tamara Keith. Biden has said he has no plans to visit East Palestine, but federal officials from the EPA and the CDC are on the ground there conducting a survey on how residents are doing. The EPA plans to hold a public meeting on Thursday. This as many residents complain of feeling sick 3 weeks after that train carrying toxic chemicals derailed, contaminating the soil, water, and air. This is NPR News. New data shows that U.S. power plants emitted fewer planet-warming and human-harming emissions last year. But as NPR's Nathan Rott reports, it's believed the country's total emissions rose.
The Environmental Protection Agency says the reduction in power plant pollution, which was largely due to the continued decline of the coal industry, came amid increased energy demand. Demands that were met by natural gas power and renewable energy sources like hydropower and solar. The change caused some harmful pollutants, like sulfur dioxide, to fall by 10% compared to 2021. The reduction in climate warming emissions, though, was just 1%. And preliminary estimates from the Rhodium Group, published last month, show U.S. emissions likely rose 1.3% in 2021, despite the shifts in the power sector. Nathan Rott, NPR News.
Off the coast of Italy, a wooden boat crowded with migrants smashed into rocky reefs and broke apart before dawn today. At least 80 people survived, including some who managed to reach the shore. Rescuers recovered nearly 60 bodies, and dozens more people are listed as missing in the rough waters. The United Nations Refugee and Migration Agency says some survivors indicated the boat had as many as 200 passengers when it set out from Turkey. Asian markets are trading lower at this hour. The Asia Dow is down nearly 1%. Crude oil futures are trading higher, up nearly 0.5% at $76.68 a barrel. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News.
Get into character while you get ready for a night out. Binge on culture with Pop Culture Happy Hour, one of NPR's daily podcasts. More voices, all ears. NPR Podcasts.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. Welcome back for the second hour of Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate magazine. If you missed the first segments, no worries, because you know what? We're everywhere you want to be. If you get your live streaming, we're probably on it. We are on iHeart, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, JioSaavn. If you're in India, we get a lot of listeners from there. I could not figure out why I was getting so many friend requests from that region, but now I know. We're everywhere. Spotify, all the things. So you can go back and get it. But we are only live here. FateMagRadio.com/Fate-Radio. So, by the way, when you are hitting that site, you can find back issues of Fate. You can find all kinds of goodies. We have shirts, which are so comfy. I just had to put that out there. We have trading cards. We have everything. And just please remember to keep our fearless leader, Phyllis, in your prayers and send her some healing, flowing energy as she continues her recovery. She did have a stroke, but she is working on that, and I am always so impressed with how fearless she is, and she is tough. So just keep her in your thoughts if you could. And now we are back with my guests, Jaci and Bill Kousoulas. They are the founders of Phenomenology Research Professionals, as well as the authors of Building the Bridge. That is so not right. Bridging the Tragedy, Silver Linings in the Mysterious Ohio River Valley. And gee, guys, I hope you don't mind me retitling your book for you. But, sorry.
It was difficult coming up with a title, so we appreciate your assistance with that.
We should have talked to you a few months ago.
But, it's great. It is such a good book. And one of the points that I especially liked, I haven't mentioned this, but when I first went to Amazon to check it out, because I always like to see it the way that, listeners will find it. And the lead line for your whole description is trauma manifests in myriad ways. And that's so true. It doesn't have to be something like this. You can find trauma in so many different life experiences, and some things that wouldn't be trauma for others are terrible for you. And I think y'all found this as you were going through your interview process, maybe, that some people were affected in such very different ways. They were still traumatized, but their perceptions were different. Is that true?
Absolutely. We had one fellow, he was talking, and it wasn't until he put the Marshall University plane crash, the football team was on the plane, and he was a student at Marshall, and the plane crashed, and it wasn't until he linked that into his time frame when he was talking about stuff that it literally came crushing down on him. And then this, like, all of it came out. And at the end of the interview, he's like, wow, I must needed to get rid of all of that he did not know how much trauma he was carrying from all of that, and the raw emotion that was still there with it.
And for anybody who's not familiar with the Marshall University plane crash, that took place just a few years after the Silver Bridge disaster happened, in Huntington, West Virginia. That's where the Thundering Herd played. And the plane went down after a varsity game, and the entire football team was killed. So in this happening to all these young people just a few short years after the Silver Bridge disaster, I mean, what a horrendous series of events in a very short period of time. That was Rick you were talking about, Rick Handley. And wow, it really affected him in ways. He also talked about his friend Steve, who he roomed with in college. And Steve actually was killed in a head-on car accident on the way back home from school during the same timeline as well, too. So yeah, Rick went through an awful lot in a very short period of time. And then he lost his first wife in a battle to cancer. So he talked about that as well, too. So trauma hit him from a number of different angles. The catalyst for the interview certainly was the Silver Bridge disaster, but the other things that were part of his life that hit him so hard, he shared those with us. But he's a man of tremendous faith, and he talked about his faith and how he's very grateful, and he's extremely humble. He's a great guy. We really enjoyed talking with him. One of the more emotional of the interviews that we had. And at the end of it, he showed us a picture and gave us a picture of 5 generations in his family who are living. And I think it's his mom, and then him, his daughter, and then great grandchild, our grandchild, and then great grandchild, which was
they're all females. Yeah, they're all females but Rick. So
Yep. He was an awesome. Talk about post-traumatic growth. Talk about turning a bad thing into a good thing. All kinds of bad things.
Yes. Well, I have to say that man's resiliency is astounding.
Absolutely.
I'm overwhelmed by it.
We were talking earlier a little bit, and I think, Kat, you mentioned about Appalachia and the folks that are out there. And when I was working on my dissertation, I found an article that I needed for my literature review that I both used for the dissertation and for the book. And it's about the resilience, frankly, of Appalachian people. And it talked about the hardiness that they have and the fact that they band together and they overcome things that you wouldn't believe that people would be able to overcome. And West Virginia is not a real economically booming type area. So a lot of times people are doing this with, less resources than other states might have. And just tremendous statement to their hardiness, their resilience, their stick-to-itness, and their sense of community. It's just off the charts.
Well, I have found that to be true. I love that area. I've only been to West Virginia once, but I love that mountain region. I've been to very varied areas through Tennessee and the Carolinas, and I'm always surprised by just how strong they are. And I really think that it's, you said that this gentleman was a man of faith. A lot of people would lose that faith facing so many horrible incidents, and yet his is strong. And that's a conscious choice. You choose to stay positive. You choose to walk in your faith, to be able to work through the things that you come across. Is that what you found with the people that were faith-based that you spoke with primarily?
Oh, absolutely.
I just find that people that don't have that, sometimes I wonder how they overcome things. And I know a lot of people would just say, oh, well, that's a placebo, or, various other shrug it off type statements. But you can't escape the fact that something keeps people going through all the that gentleman, all the things that they face in life. Some people have an overwhelming load of burden, and yet they get through it. There are not very many explanations other than that.
There's a statement that I've heard that kind of dovetails with what we're talking about, and that is that if you live your life as though there is no God, you may face some consequences at the end. But if you live your life as if there is a God, and turns out that there's not, did you really lose anything? And I think that my answer to that would be no, I don't think so. Because if you choose to live along correct precepts, a moral life, biblical standards, what have you, if you choose to live that way and do good by others, I don't know about anybody else, but I typically feel really good about myself if I'm doing good by others. And I'd rather keep that feeling going. It works. And to have a faith in, a power greater than yourself, and to anchor yourself through these difficult times. I know I certainly have had to develop that over the years. I've always had it, but it's developed. It's not developed as a result of having an easy life. It's developed as a result of going.
As a result of having an easy life.
Yeah, it's as a matter of going through these things. Yeah, you got to go through the really challenging things to get challenged.
Well, and if you don't have the challenges to face, then you don't realize that possibility is there, because you don't reach for that possibility. When you don't have any support, you seek it. And if you're lucky, you find someone that can help you get there. So I have always been a fan of people that, I had a Sunday school teacher, I'm going to quote this, but, love them till they ask you why. You don't have to proselytize. You don't have to be in people's face. But if somebody says, how on earth can you possibly be so positive, or, how can you have this outlook or whatever, then you can share with, whatever it is that you are getting that from, you can share that. Whether it's faith, whether it's other studies, wherever it's coming from, if somebody's asking you, they're looking for that. And I guarantee you, every person that you interviewed had to face that question at some point. Because I can't think of many more traumatic things.
No, going through what they did, and that whole town being devastated, and people who we interviewed losing loved ones. Linda Lane, who we've talked about a little bit, maybe not by mentioning her a whole lot, but Linda, actually, her brother lost his wife. So she lost her sister-in-law in the bridge disaster. And so she was 18 years old when the bridge went down. And those kids who now didn't have a mom, they came to live with Linda and her mom. And so the way she worded it to us was that mom and dad just got done raising all of us kids. And now all of a sudden there's two little ones, real little ones under the age of 3 years old, coming to live with them. But those kids turned that family's life around into something positive by having a chance to have these young, impressionable little kids in the house again. So there was that too.
Sometimes out of the worst problems come the greatest blessings.
Absolutely.
And you don't really recognize that as being a thing until you're down the road a little bit, because you have to heal from the horror that you're dealing with. I wanted to get you to talk a little bit, because I know that through the phenomenology research professionals, that is what you do. You focus on the correlations between paranormal experiences and post-traumatic growth. So, because you're very fascinated, if I understand it correctly, by anomalous phenomenon. And I am too, right? And so when you started this group, it kind of allows you to bring different passions into play. which makes for a lot of fun, I would think.
It has been. It really has been a lot of fun. Our first project being the book we're talking about now, we had several other ideas for the next project. And it wasn't until we were at the Mothman Festival and we had the opportunity to present, our findings, and we had the book there in a tent where we were selling the book. And during our presentation, we kind of kicked out a number of different topics that we were looking for our next study, which had I not gone down in early January with physical challenges that I had, we would have begun this already. But at the end of our presentation at the festival, we asked the crowd, we threw a few ideas out. And you want to share a little bit about what happened at that point? Because that was all you.
Okay, hang on just a minute, because my timing is terrible and we have to take a break. But we will move into that right after this. And everybody, y'all come back too, because this part gets fascinating.
Warning, the following message does not necessarily reflect the views of WBHM-DB or its hosts, guests, listeners, or of any functioning adult in general. In fact, Frank should probably seek professional help. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi there, Frank Lee here. I thought that I would spend a few moments telling you about the positivity from the network here. The overall message of para-unity and happiness, and how everyone here wants to get along with everyone out there, and how everything is just wonderful. Wait, Cat's not looking. Okay, I've got something to really tell you. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what's really going on. Honestly, all that being nice and positive crap was kind of hurting my soul, as dark as it is. So, what's really happening? Well, you see it all the time. Everybody and their brother out there has a paranormal team because they watch a couple of episodes of Ghost Hunters or some crap like that. So they go and they spend half their mortgage payment on tools and things that light up that they don't understand. And then the next logical step, after buying matching black t-shirts and posing like 90s rappers for their Facebook page, is to, of course, have their own podcast. Well, you know what? You're not going to find that crap here. What we have here at WBHM Digital Broadcasting is the best host, the best guest, bringing you real information. All of the hosts here on this network know their stuff. They are the people who have been out there doing the work, doing actual research. And no, by research, I don't mean binge watching some kind of cheesy TV show on Netflix. I mean reading books. I mean out in the field doing the legwork. And who are they interviewing on their shows? They're bringing you the people they have learned from. They're bringing you the best in the field, covering all kinds of topics from UFOs and aliens to Bigfoot to cryptozoology to ghosts to anything you can think of a bit strange and unexplained. It is here, and you're going to get the best information here. So stay tuned to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Don't go anywhere. Speaking of going somewhere, I've got to go before my mic gets cut. We'll see you there on WBHM-DB.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I'm so glad that y'all are here, and I apologize for the abruptness of that break. But Jackie, I am mostly apologetic to you because we were just getting started, and I realized the time, and I apologize.
No worries.
Thank you.
No worries.
Now,
so to answer your question, after our presentation was winding down, we had our last PowerPoint PowerPoint, and we had listed 3 different things that we thought were interesting to investigate. Although after being at the Mothman Festival and hearing some of the stories of just some of the people that live in West Virginia and right in Point Pleasant, we had a lot of really good information there too. So there'll probably be more work in West Virginia. But as I was going through the list of things, the one thing that's most passionate to me is sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and paranormal activity and post-traumatic growth that comes from that type of thing. And as I was talking about it, and I had not had any intention at all to talk about any of this other than, maybe just a little tiny bit of it, but it just all opened up and I started sharing. And I talked about, that abuse is such a touchy thing, especially when it comes to sexual abuse, and people don't want to talk about that or be open about it a lot of times. And I said that anybody that wants to volunteer for that study can do it anonymously. We had anonymous people in this, the book that we're talking about tonight. And I went on to say that when I was a young child, a very young child, I was terrified every night. I had these heads that would appear on my dresser, and I would peek out from the covers and I would look to see if they were still there, and they were always still there. And I don't know how long this went on. I was a little kid, so for me, it went on an eternity. I mean, it seemed like every night. My mom told me my eyes were playing tricks on me, and I knew what I was seeing. And I was trying to figure out why my eyes were playing tricks on me and why I was seeing these things. And I couldn't figure it out. Well, I was talking to my sister who shared the bedroom with me maybe 5 years ago. I don't even know how long ago it was now. And she's scared of everything. I can't hardly talk to her about paranormal things. She has a hard time listening to the paranormal things that happen in my life. The spirit box sessions that we do, she has a hard time. She gets scared for me. It doesn't scare me, it scares her. But we were talking about some stuff, and I said something about the heads on the dresser that I would see at night, and she said, I saw them too. And she's my older sister. And I said, why didn't you ever say anything? And she said, it was her job to always protect me. No matter what, she was always going to protect me. And she definitely wasn't going to scare me by these heads on the dresser. So she never brought it up to me. Well, then a few years after that, during the Me Too movement, everything was coming out. And I found out that was the age that my uncle started molesting her. So we had sexual abuse that happened at the same time the heads were appearing on the dresser in the room that we shared. And it wasn't like I was just seeing these heads. She was seeing these heads too. So it was a real thing that was happening. And there was other paranormal activity in that house that I saw that I, was part of. And my siblings witnessed some of it too. But my point is that after I was done talking about this, some lady came up and she had her hand over her mouth and she was almost teary-eyed, and Bill was going to start talking to her, and she shook her head no, and she pointed to me that she needed to talk to me. And when I looked at her, I could just tell. And I said, you saw the heads too? And she started fanning herself, and she's like, yes, but they were snakes. And she said that she had repressed this memory and not recalled it until I started talking about the heads on the dresser and the sexual abuse and how it tied together.
And they were snakes?
She saw snakes in her room.
That is a little not something I would have made the connotation between.
I think it was just knowing that I think she just blocked it. She was so afraid of it,
Well, I
so I guess
that.
Yeah. And then
that is interesting, because I do know that a lot of people who have mediumship or psychic abilities seem to develop them as a result or a defense mechanism from abuse. And I find that interesting, because very few people who have gifts of that nature will tell you until they have healed somewhat about what happened to them. They don't even always admit it to themselves. They've just always been psychic or always been, mediums. And they're not the same thing. And I just find that interesting that you've come across that.
Yeah.
When you share that, or how often do you share that? I mean, is it something that you've discussed in front of a lot of crowds, or
the story that I just told?
Well, about the heads, about the phenomenon occurring after that had happened with your sister, to your sister.
Well, actually, I mean, I talk about it now openly, and I remember things even, and I forget so much because there was so much to me that happened to me growing up. And my dad was a raging alcoholic, and he beat my mother on a regular basis. So there was always abuse in our home. And there was 4 children in our family, and our bedrooms are at the end of the hallway. And my mom and dad's was on the other end of the hallway by the stairs. And all 4 of us kids woke up at the same time and went to our doorways. And Jesus was standing at the end of the hall. And I was really tiny. And I remember that. I was like maybe 3 years old. So it started very, very early in my life. And I'm not real open with a lot of people, like just in the area that I live in, but my friends I'm open with. And the problem is if you start sharing that with people that aren't open to this type of stuff, they look at you like you're absolutely crazy.
True that.
And I'm a retired postmaster, so I didn't talk about it real openly until, a few years before I was ready to retire, because at that point I didn't care what people thought. I didn't care what other postmasters thought. I didn't care what management thought about me at the Postal Service. And that's really how I am right now. I don't care what people think about me. I don't care if they want to think that I'm crazy. These experiences are happening. And literally my husband, he's never questioned anything as far as any abilities that I have or anything like that. But he literally witnessed something in our brand new home that was just built. We were down in the basement and voices started talking out of the floor right where we were at. So he heard it too. There you got it.
So Bill became an instant believer.
Well, strangely enough, the last 2 residences that we've lived in have been brand new. And one of the reasons that I wanted brand new was because I guess I'm kind of a neat freak in the first place, but I don't want to live in somebody else's haunted house. So we didn't have any trouble like this at our last place. We've only been here in this house for, 3 months now. And since we've lived here, we hear ghost barking that the dogs don't hear. We hear it, but the dogs don't hear it. We've had, like Jackie was just talking about, we were both in the basement, and she has an area where she has a crystal shop. She has a few online businesses, and one of them is a crystal shop where she practices Reiki as well. And I was over in the gym, which is on the other side of the bookcases that have all of our research materials in. And I walked up to where she was at, and all of a sudden I heard what sounded to me like a voice going over like a police scanner. And that's not exactly what Jackie heard, but she heard it too. She just experienced it a little bit differently than I did. We're like, what was that?
That's interesting.
And there's no.
And we did have things in the other house. Bill he couldn't hear things and he couldn't see things. So he gets to experience it here. He's lucky.
Welcome to the other side.
Yeah.
He's now become an experiencer.
Well, you know what? It will bring you a shock when you have that. My husband is always amazed and usually in denial. He's the engineering mind. He's a business owner, and he's very logical, methodical. And I can be, but I am also a seat of your pants, and I know that I have experiences, and there are things that happen sometimes here. And, he has experienced enough of that now to where he'll look at me and say, you need to take care of that. Make this not happen. And that's kind of funny. So does it shock you, Bill? Did it shock you then?
What's really interesting about all of it, Kat, is that I haven't always been like this, but I've gotten to be a little bit of a low reactor to almost any kind of stimulus, whether it's something going on in the business world, or I guess I haven't been this way since I was injured, but I felt a little bit more vulnerable. But when it comes to these different things, manifestations of possible paranormal occurrences in the house, I mean, I don't even really bat an eye. I just mentioned it to Jackie. I heard that ghost barking again. It doesn't even put the hair up on the back of my neck. It's just like, oh, yeah, there it is. It doesn't even really bother me, which is odd because I haven't always been somebody with ice water in my veins. I'm really not.
Right. That's fun.
Yesterday I was sitting at the breakfast bar and an orange was sitting there, and it's a quartz countertop, and it's so, quartz is so heavy, and you'd literally need like something dropping something extremely hard to make anything roll on a quartz countertop. And it was sitting there, and it was sitting there for a couple days. And so I'm like looking at this Wizard of Oz puzzle that I'm putting together, and I'm not really near the orange, and it starts rolling towards me, maybe 1.5 to 2 inches. And I said to Bill, I'm like, that freaking orange just rolled at me. And he's like, what? I said, the orange just rolled at me. And he says, all right, our house is haunted. We need an exorcism.
So I ate that orange.
Just trying to give you a snack.
I ate that orange today, and I had to throw half of it away because it was rotten.
Well, I guess somebody was trying to let you know that needed to go.
Maybe so.
Yes.
But, I find that fascinating because it's usually something that has logic behind it when there's something that happens around our house. Like an orange that needs to go, so it's going to catch your attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that I would have eaten the orange. That's just me. I kid. But that's interesting because you're comfortable, and it's very rare for things to knock you sideways, isn't it?
It seems to be that way. I mean, with this type of thing, maybe part of it is having gone through some of the things that I've had to go through. As like we talked about with the dissertation and the topic that I had for that and we didn't go into the metrics of this, but I was married the first time for about 2 years, and it took 6.5 years to get divorced. Right. So the trauma that I experienced as a result of that experience wasn't of the emotional nature so much as, it was emotional, but not emotional like you would assume between a husband and a wife. It was more of a matter of the absurdity of the court system, and then the games that were played in the court system, and just the frustration and all that type of thing. So having gone through that, there haven't been a whole lot of circumstances that have really rocked me, because it really looked like there were some horrible financial straits coming that just never manifested. I would say, for me, this most recent thing that happened to me almost 2 months ago when I collapsed due to the problems with my back have been more earth-shattering than really anything else I've dealt with. More as a matter of, I'm a very fit person, I'm a very active person, and all of a sudden my strength is gone, and I'm paralyzed for a couple weeks, and had to relearn how to walk again. And it's been really kind of spooky going through that. But as I've been processing through that, I've also been able to kind of go back to the well and experience what the people in Point Pleasant did with the bridge disaster, and with maybe the paranormal things that they experienced during that time as well too, and go even back further into the divorce and think, gosh, if I could have gotten through that and my friends got through the bridge disaster, I'll figure out how to walk again. And I'm probably back to 55% of where I was at before now. I've got to get this right leg moving again, and then I'll be back. But it's been challenging.
I have utmost confidence that you will be back because it's amazing what the spirit can get you through. And It's all about what's in you. It really, it makes such a difference. And I'm glad that it doesn't shake you, that you've got the activity in your new, never been anybody there before house, because a lot of times I have ghost dogs here. I've lost 3 dogs from this home, and Kylie was she's the last of the original Fab 4, and I seem to always have 4 dogs, but I had one just walk through the house, and she was a beautiful, beautiful white. She looked like a mini Great Pyrenees. She was very malnourished and abused when she was young, and we were her first safe home. So I saw her just, she came out of the hallway, made the dog leg into the foyer, into the kitchen, but she wasn't white. She was translucent gray. And I was just like, well, hello. And I'll hear one of my other dogs dog tags a lot. And the other animals respond to that, because usually he'll be on one end of the kitchen while they're laying in the dining room, or vice versa. But he's always separate from where they are, and he always shakes. And they'll look at, always, whatever it is, they'll look at wherever it was, and then they'll look at me like, what are you going to do? You heard that too, right? I mean, so the ghost dog barking might be a dog that used to hunt that area, or it might be one of your current animals' birth mates, or somebody else that just likes having company to play with. Maybe that's why they were rowdy tonight.
That's a really interesting perspective, because Jackie mentioned early on that we rescued these 2, and her daughter lives in the Ozarks, and we went to go visit Mandy back in July, right after we lost our 17-year-old cat, who I was really, really attached to. We both were, but he was my best friend. And several days after letting him go, as a result of being in kidney failure for a long time, we found these 2, and they were living under the porch in the wilderness in the Ozarks, straddling the Arkansas border of Missouri. And half of their litter had been eaten by wild animals. So there were only, if you can imagine, 12 puppies in this litter. 6 of them were alive yet, and we took 2 of them with us, the 2 that we have now. And they've really, I've not had a dog in over 30 years. So to have the dogs at this stage of our lives was really kind of scary, but they've totally changed our lives for the better. And who knows, maybe you're right. Maybe that is one of their siblings that's been doing the ghost barking. I have no idea. That's entirely possible. I'm open to it.
That's interesting. Well, I'm glad they have y'all. But we have to take our last break. And I can't believe our time is going so swiftly, but we will be right back. And I hope that y'all are enjoying this show as much as I am. We will see y'all on the flip side. If you have questions, get them to me. You can message me on Facebook or put them in chat. We'll get them.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello, I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the World Wide Web of Weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. Welcome back for this final segment of Fate Mag Radio. I am so glad that y'all are here. My guests tonight have been Bill and Jaci Kousoulas, and they are fantastic is what they are. They have authored a great book, Bridging the Tragedy, Silver Linings in the Mysterious Ohio River Valley. They are the founders of Phenomenology Research, and I have completely lost research professionals. Okay, got it back. But in their research into the bridge there in Point Pleasant, the Silver Bridge, just as overwhelming. What they brought to this book through people trusting them enough to be open with their experiences will blow you away. I have learned a lot. I knew that there had been so much about this, and something, Bill, that I had not realized that you brought is that this was so close to the Marshall plane crash. And yeah, when you were telling people about that, I wanted to make sure that we mentioned that if you're younger, you're not familiar with that, then, there's actually a film, We Are Marshall, that is about this team's experience. It was horrible. So that's kind of where we are. We've been talking about paranormal and ghost dogs and all of the other things too, because we are those people. So your turn. What do you want? Because we've only got about 12 minutes, and y'all have so much to offer, and you have brought so much to this show. What do you want to leave people with? Jaci, would you like to go first?
Sure. What I would like people to know that when we were at the festival and we were promoting our book, as people were coming to our tables, my go-to thing was, this is an excellent book. And it's not because we wrote it. It's because the people's interviews that are in it. The people make the book. Their interviews are touching. They're emotional. They're fun. They're just everything. They're everything. And literally, so many people have told us that when reading the interviews, it makes them feel like they were sitting there right with us as we were having our conversations.
I would agree with that.
And I think that's a great point. And one of the things we didn't even really touch on were the experiencers. We have a couple of experiencers that are in the book, and they really primarily spoke about their encounters with Mothman and with the paranormal phenomena, whereas the rest of the folks focused primarily on the bridge disaster. But Andy Colvin, who's the author and editor and publisher we've been talking about a little bit, he had an experience with Mothman more than once in the Charleston, West Virginia area during the entire flap. And he's been able to grow personally as a result of going through what he did. He didn't necessarily think what happened with him was traumatic, but after he encountered Mothman, he was gifted with all types of different abilities, one of them being the ability to draw and to write and to do all kinds of things artistically that he wasn't even conscious of having the ability to do prior to this encounter. And Harriet Plumbrook, a childhood friend of Andy's, is one of the most fascinating individuals that Jackie and I have ever met. We just absolutely love her. She is genius level. They both have 160 plus IQs. Harriet is a medical intuitive. And in fact, the very first time that we met Andy and Harriet, we did it over a Zoom meeting. And during that conversation, we knew that Harriet had the ability to kind of see into people's medical conditions. She was able to do that over a Zoom meeting. In fact, she told me that she thought that I was dealing with diverticulitis, which that had been something that had been, it had been diagnosed a few years ago, but it was misdiagnosed. Well, within a few days, I was actually rushed to the hospital for the first time in my life. This is going back a couple of years ago now, a few days after we talked to Harriet, and I was having stomach issues. They were gastrointestinal. And it just blows me away. She has all kinds of abilities. She has the 2 Agent Scully marks on the back of her neck that look like they were scooped out, kind of like you saw in the X-Files.
Right.
And she's just, we could go on for probably another hour about her, but I know we're almost out of time.
Well, what Bill didn't tell you about that with Harriet is that when she diagnosed him, she basically told him it was a severe issue that he needed to pay attention to. And he was literally taken by ambulance out of the house a few days later for these issues and hospitalized. So
yeah, that was the first time I was taken by ambulance.
It's an experience, right? Especially when you have to say the first time. So,
yeah.
And they're right back.
We're up to 3 now. Hopefully no more for a while.
Well, I hope not to, because my husband's voice when he said, "Is that an ambulance?" And I said, "Mm-hmm." He said, "Is that your ambulance?" I said, "Mm-hmm, but I'm okay." So,
oh boy.
Well, I mean, I was okay. It was not the end of the world, and nobody died, so it's a good thing. You know, it was just the tone of voice and having to give the affirmative answer. It's just kind of like, oh dear. But, well, I have to tell you that I have learned so much from y'all tonight, and from your book, and just from your energy. I mean, y'all are so awesome. I've enjoyed this conversation a whole lot. And I know that we're getting into the post-COVID conventions are going to start happening again. People are going to be doing things. You have a wonderful, wonderful book that is, perfect for having at these conventions. Do y'all have anything booked so far this year?
We've got a couple of small shows that we're going to do here local to where we live. We're in the Northern Illinois area. We're kind of in the greater Chicagoland area, but it's really more cornfields than it is skyscrapers where we're at. We've got a couple of shows coming up that we're going to do here locally at a couple libraries. That'll be going on in March, I think. Are they both in March?
One's in April, one's in March.
One's in April, one's in March. And we'll likely be back at the festival, the Mothman Festival again this year.
That people are going to be so glad to hear that.
I'm glad to hear that, because I was worried with the dogs we weren't going to be able to do it, but I think
they're just going to have to come with.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's going to be fantastic. And you know what? I have never been to the Mothman Festival. And it
oh
is
man,
on
is
my
it
list.
a good time? It is a good time.
Well, I have so many people that I enjoy who are related to that phenomenon, or their work is, that I would love a chance to meet y'all. Maybe I can manage that. If not this year, maybe next.
Well, that would be great.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, maybe I could meet some of your subjects too, because I think they're so brave. I think that people that go through the events that y'all share that they shared with you. Survivorship has all different kinds of appearances and challenges as well as rewards. I mean, you're still here, yet, you know, when you are and someone that matters to you isn't, that's a whole different kettle of fish, right? And y'all helped a lot of people to be able to speak through and share that. And that's a gift too. They didn't just gift you, you gifted them as well. I think.
Thank you for saying that. We had a wonderful, wonderful time with the project. It's just from the beginning to the very end of it, getting the book published and being at the festival, and then being able to be on shows like yours is just it gives me chills even to say it. It's sometimes you got to pinch yourself and stop and think this really is real. We were able to be a part of this wonderful legend and help bring the stories out of folks that maybe didn't have the ability or maybe the conduit to be able to tell their tale the way that they were able to with us. And what a wonderful co-creation that was between them and us.
Absolutely. And you know, I just think that you've done a great job. Bill, I'm going to put the same question to you that Jackie answered, which is, what do you want people to know personally out of this experience?
It's just been very humanizing. I mean, for me, it's been very humanizing and kind of self-actualizing. I've been such a fan. I mean, like I like to tell people, the legend of Mothman brought us to town, but the people of Point Pleasant and the Ohio River Valley, they brought us back. And it's a sense of friendship. Every time we go back to Point Pleasant, we make more friends, and they're legitimate friends. They're not just passersby. They're not just people that you say, "Hey, what's up?" and hope I don't have to run into that guy again. I mean, you leave there with more friends, and it's just a phenomenal experience. I just love the community there, and I want to keep going back every year, multiple times the same year. It's going to give me a good reason to get rehabbed so I can do that.
I tell you what, sometimes you need a motivator for that, right? That is
Yep.
not for sissies. But, well, I'm glad that you are rehabbing, and I'm so glad that you're okay and that you could be here. And I really think that this was the way this was supposed to work, because maybe the people who are dealing with their own horrid disaster right now can maybe take something from the experiences of the people that you interviewed. You know, there's not a lot of difference when you have life-altering moments and things that are going to be life-changing for more than just you. And I hope that the people, and of course I'm referring to the people in East Palestine, as they are trying to find their way to go back to their kind of normal, whatever their normal is going to be now, I hope that they can maybe lean on the resilience of another community that went through a horrendous moment in time and found their way through it too. So
Absolutely.
You know, there's a lot of little places all over this globe that don't necessarily fall into the bailiwick of people that can help them. And I hope that your book helps a lot of people realize that there are ways to get through tragedies and that they're not the end of everything. So I think that you give a great voice of hope when you speak about the resilience and faith of the survivors, of the people that were lost. You know, I think you matter a lot, and I'm glad that you were here.
Thank you, Kat. We really enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely.
Me too. Y'all are just really nifty people.
So are you.
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all. But I have to tell everyone that, you know, you've got to get this book. And I am I am not just Pollyanna. I am serious about it. This is fantastic. And it comes from a point of strength. This is what they do. They went, they set up their study, they got the questions together, they went and did the groundwork, the interviews, and they have brought back the ways that the people of Mount Pleasant and the area around there found a way. Bridging the Tragedy, Silver Linings in the Mysterious Ohio River Valley. It is on Amazon. It's right there. You can read all about it before you buy it, but you know what? It's only going to tease you. You're going to need to get it. So I really recommend it. And thank you again so much, Bill and Jackie. I've had a great time. And don't forget, if y'all are out there and you don't like the world that you're living in, you can change that. All it takes is just a little manifesting, put a little energy into envisioning what you want it to look like,